All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Landscapes of Change, Resilient and Functional Ecosystems. My name is Twyla Neely-Strite, and I'm Education and Operations Associate at Illinois Green Alliance. Today's program was put on by the Illinois Green Alliance Programs Committee, a volunteer group that coordinates educational events covering a wide range of topics throughout the year for the green building industry. The team that put today's event on consists of Janet Olson, Sydney Van Kuren, and Connor Redding. You've all been muted upon entry, so please type any questions you have into the Q&A and we'll get them answered at the end. This webinar is being recorded and will be sent out in a follow-up email along with some other resources. So for those who are unfamiliar, Illinois Green Alliance is a membership-driven nonprofit organization that advances green buildings and sustainable communities for all. Our 5-year strategic plan pushes the green building industry to meet or get on the path to net zero. We achieve this work through educational events such as panels and building tours, by engaging communities and partnering with organizations across Illinois, and by advocating for new policies and legislation. Members can view our recorded webinars on our on-demand webinar library on our website. To learn more about membership, see upcoming events, and get involved, use our website, illinoisgreenalliance.org. I also want to take a moment to recognize Illinois Green Alliance's sustaining sponsors who make our work possible. A special thank you to our gold level sponsors, ComEd, Resource Innovations, Sloan, and USGBC. Make a commitment to advancing green buildings and communities across the state. Start a conversation about sponsorship today at illinoisgreenalliance.com/sponsorship. Now we have a great lineup of speakers for today's program. Nicole is the president and COO of Greenprint Partners, a Chicago-based WBE sustainable planning and civil engineering firm. Nicole's passion for sustainable urban development led her to co-found Greenprint in 2014 with the goal of helping public agencies and institutional property owners increase their use of nature-based solutions like green infrastructure to make our communities more resilient in the face of climate change. Greenprint has since helped public agencies invest over $50 million in nature-based solutions and implemented green infrastructure on dozens of schools, parks, housing complexes, churches, and other institutional properties across the country. Jack Pizzo is founder and principal of the Pizzo Group of companies. Jack leads a team of talented landscape architects, ecologists, consultants, contractors, and nursery professionals working throughout the U.S. to create and manage sustainable landscapes, as well as create, restore, and steward ecosystems. Michael is a professional landscape architect with over 20 years of experience in site planning and landscape design at firms in Chicago, Washington, D.C., and Oregon. He is the co-founder and president of Omni Workshop, an innovative studio that designs spaces for people, embracing nature to test and advance the ecology and culture of the place. Michael also holds a position as an adjunct professor at the IIT College of Architecture, Master of Landscape Architecture and Urbanism program. With more than 7 years of experience working with multidisciplinary teams across the country on projects of numerous types, Zach brings his proficiency in landscape architecture, planning, and data-driven design to the projects he works on. As a landscape architect, he works closely with those on the team to better understand the site constraints and identify inherent design opportunities afforded by the proposed project site. He produces physical analyses of the project site with a focus on context, topography, climatic conditions, local culture, environmental issues, and vegetation, which fosters an adaptable site design. Zach seeks to apply his experience as a landscape architect to transform challenged urban areas into highly valued and ecologically functional places through the reimagining of traditional infrastructure and public open spaces. Now I'm going to turn it over to Sydney Van Kuren to discuss our agenda for today and get us started.
Thank you, Twyla, and thank you everyone who has joined us today. And also, obviously, thank you so much to Illinois Green and our panelists for joining us for this discussion today. It's been really fun to help organize this event, and so I wanted to launch us with a fun icebreaker. Everyone is very passionate about this work, and so we've got a fun icebreaker poll for us. But just to run through this agenda real quick, we'll be kind of setting the stage, thinking kind of big picture about this topic. Each panelist will present a few slides on their area of expertise. We'll have a facilitated discussion with some Q&A, and we have a closing poll for you all as well. So Twyla, if you could go to our first polling question. We had a little fun with this. I hope this poll makes you smile. If you were a functional landscape, what would you be? And the choices are meant to be fun and get you kind of anchored in our topic today and to share a little bit about yourself with us today. As you can see, they are, it's a little bit of a personality quiz, if you will. So see which one of these identifies most closely with you. And, you can have fun with it. There's no wrong answers. Twyla, I am not able to see the results coming in, so feel free to go ahead and close it if you feel like we've reached a good number.
I think we have. I'm going to end the poll. I think you'll be able to see the results. It's a good mix.
Cool. Yeah, I don't know. Are these seen by everyone, or should I read them off? I'll read them off. So 20% of you are wetlands. Percolate, you like to let things percolate. 35% wild prairie. A lot of dot connectors here. I love it. 15% green roof. Thank you for your wellness co-benefits. Riparian areas. I think that's what I would be. 20% of you are mediator extraordinaires. And then 10% of you are all about that carbon drawdowns. So thank you for your peatland. Okay, great. And then on a more kind of informative note for our panelists, we'd also like you to quickly tell us a little bit more about your work with resilient and functional landscapes. How have you interacted with these in your professional work? Please go ahead and give us a quick response to this so our presenters can have this going into their presentations. And so you all can learn about each other as well. We'll just give a couple of seconds. Twyla, feel free to close it when we've got threshold.
All right, I think this looks good. I'm going to share results now.
Excellent. More diverse answers. So 30%, about a third of you are doing implementation. Quarter of you have planned or designed these landscapes. 11%, maybe I'm not sure. And another 35%, no, but hope to soon. So that's great information. Thank you so much for sharing that about yourselves. And I look forward to seeing how all of that plays out in the Q&A. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Nicole to get us started.
Great. Thank you, Sydney. Hello, everybody. Welcome, fellow prairies. That's what I would have chosen if I'd been able to vote. Again, I'm Nicole Shabazz, President and Chief Operating Officer of Greenprint Partners. Excited to moderate this discussion today. Just real quick on Greenprint, we're a sustainable planning and civil engineering firm based here in Chicago, a WBE and a certified B Corporation, and everything that we do is approached with a lens of sustainability and equity. Next slide. Just a little bit about our services, everything again centered around climate and community resilience. We help public agencies and private property owners integrate nature-based solutions into their projects and programs. Our civil engineering team in particular specializes in large site developments that create the best opportunity to integrate nature and benefit people where they live, work, and play. So while our panel today is made up of landscape architects, I want to remind you that your civil engineer should also be an important sustainability partner for your projects. All right, next slide. So we're here to talk about resilient landscapes. What exactly are resilient landscapes? Fundamentally, they are the use of vibrant natural systems that provide vital ecosystem services and help us adapt to our changing climate. Nature-based solutions keep our communities cool, they manage rainwater and prevent flooding, they keep our air and water clean, and they sequester carbon. And in developing our cities, we paved over and re-engineered these natural systems, disrupting their ability to provide these services. So to keep up with the changing climate, we really need to work on bringing those systems back. Next slide. And resilient landscapes are extremely flexible. They can be as large as a constructed wetland. They can be as small as a backyard rain garden. They can go on our roofs and in our streets. And at the heart of any resilient landscape are native plants. And we'll see why on the next slide. Native plants and trees provide so many more benefits to the ecosystem than traditional turf grass or non-native flowers, bushes, and trees. So as you can see on the left, native plants have much deeper root systems that do a better job of soaking up rainwater and staying resilient in periods of drought. They also naturally create habitat for beneficial birds, bees, insects, and wildlife that contribute to a vibrant local ecosystem. Next slide. And the benefits of resilient landscapes go well beyond just environmental benefits like air quality and habitat restoration. Research shows all sorts of community benefits that come from access to well-maintained green space, including improvements to mental health, community safety, and social cohesion. Unfortunately, access to really high quality green space is not shared equitably. This UIC study showed that low to moderate income Hispanic neighborhoods in Chicago are further from Lake Michigan, they're further from open space, they have lower bird biodiversity, and they have the lowest percentage of tree canopy, meaning they have less access to all the ecosystem services and community benefits that we know high quality green space provides to a community. Meanwhile, the impacts of climate change are not felt equally. Neighborhoods on the south and west side are several degrees hotter and more likely to flood than communities on the north side due to underinvestment in infrastructure that has left them more susceptible to extreme heat and flooding. So as we think about how to scale investment in resilient landscapes, we need to do it with a really strong equity lens to make sure that we don't continue to perpetuate the inequitable investment in infrastructure that has led to these disparities. We need to understand that the approaches we take to planning, designing, and implementing these landscapes has to thoughtfully incorporate the needs and the resources of the communities in which they're being installed, whether it's a project in a Collier County, in an inner-ring suburb, in Lincoln Park, or West Lawndale. So now that I've set the stage, let's hear from our three esteemed panelists. They're all landscape architects whose work is centered around resilient and functional landscapes. First, Jack is going to dig in deeper into what it looks like to actually design and implement resilient landscapes. Michael will share more on how Omni is thinking innovatively to get more resilient landscapes into our urban environment. And Zach will illustrate how you can actually measure and certify the benefits of resilient landscapes in your projects. And then we'll jump into the discussion from there. So with that, I will turn it over to Jack.
Good afternoon. Next slide. I have two companies, Native Plant Nursery and Pizzo and Associates. We grow plants, seed. We also design, build, and restore and steward ecosystems all throughout the eastern half of the country. Next. Education's the key. Learned that from my grandfather who came here from Sicily, that you should always be learning. Next. If we're going to do this, you know, like Nicole has said, it's got to be, you know, kind of across the whole spectrum. And this is how you do it. We can restore what nature is left in areas, which is the green area. Next. If we add in the open space and the stormwater management system, now I'm not recommending that you remove buildings and parking lots and golf courses, but area to area comparison. This is all the open space. Next. But if we start adding plants back into the native plants back into the landscape, this is what you get. So this would be like having a national park outside your door. You know, this is because we're all filled with native plants and they can look just like regular landscapes. Next. And they thrive where we live. Next. Where we work. And next, where we play. Next. You know, if you plant just 3 native species, the opportunity for things that eat them and pollinate them, 241 species, but just by planting 3 plant species. Next. And horticultural varieties do make a difference. The species is on the left, the horticultural varieties on the right. The no pollinating insects go to the Annabelle hydrangea. They only go to the species because there's no nectaries, no nectar. Next. And it doesn't matter the habitat. These 2 pictures I took are on what used to be a bean field. So habitat is important. It doesn't need to be the high quality habitat that everybody desires. Don't let the perfect spoil the good. Next. And we need good sex. And remember, sex sells. So good mixing of gene pools, that create genetically unique individuals, which give us genetic diversity, which give us resilience in the populations. That's in the animals. Next. And in every seed that goes out there. It's genetically unique. So we can build in resilience that used to be there. Because now, next, every tree in this picture is a clone. It came from one tree and they've cloned them all. So what do you think is going to happen when the ecosystem changes or the conditions change or a disease runs through? Not good. Next. And so this next set of slides is 1998, native tree in the Cook County Forest Preserve. Something's eating it just fine, losing about 5% of its foliage. Next. Another native tree being fed upon that same day. Next. And another native tree, all within about 50 feet of each other. Next. And we know from Dr. Talmay and from Professor Nassauer that native insects rarely do more than 5% damage, and that 10% damage is actually acceptable. And if you look up at the top on the left, the oak trees east of the Mississippi River host 534 species of lepidopterans, which are the moths and butterflies, which, you see the bird in the picture, they're feeding those insects to their babies. So when you have an oak tree, you actually have a huge bird feeder that's out there. So the animals eating the insects, which stop them from creating too much damage to the plant. Next. Same day, Norway maple, no holes, no evolution between our native insects and Norway maple. So invasive species need to be removed. Next. So a couple of quick things we've learned in doing this for 35 years. You got to study history and understand it, that you can then create design based on experience, good, careful construction, so that a novice isn't in the process, which causes the system to slow down or break down. Make sure you plan and execute on long-term stewardship, because if you don't maintain it, it gets weedy. And it can be removed. And then give the feedback in each of those points constantly, so we're learning. Next. And that, make no mistake, this is all about us. Like I said, nature's fine with asphalt and concrete. It's us that must care, restore, and steward. Next. And you can start that video. This is in the middle of 22,000 acres of corn and beans. And if you do everything right, this is what you get. This is at my business farm. Next. And there we go. Now, next. This is at my house. And it's every year at the end of August into the first 2 to 3 weeks of September is the monarch's roost. And if you put all the right pieces together, you can get these conflagrations of migrating monarchs. And that doesn't come by just planting milkweed. That comes by creating the whole ecosystem. And that could happen all over. So those are the kinds of results that can happen. And that brings people closer to nature. So I will stop there and I will turn it over to Michael.
Thank you. I wanted to start on this note. So Paul Hawken, this was after he wrote Project Drawdown a few years ago. He was a keynote speaker at, I believe it was an IGA event. And he mentioned this in addressing climate crisis, how the only solution is to create more life. He's got some good quotes out there, but this one really sort of resonates with us over at Omni. And I just wanted to put it out there that that's a very powerful statement, and it's led us to, you know, in our development of our mission, vision, and values. Next. So at Omni, we really have like two sides of our company. We have a science side and a design side, and we're really integrating that science and design into working landscapes. And so basically, we, you know, at our hearts feel that a landscape has the power, or you know, you have within a landscape the ability to empower healthier and happier humans. Working landscapes, by our definition, is something that is stacking function, something that's doing more than just looking pretty. Looking good is an ethical duty. It's a responsibility that we have as designers to make something look good. That if we do everything right, that's a side benefit. That's an automatic for us. So we're looking at how do we, you know, make these landscapes work for us and do more, manage stormwater, things like that. Next. And so that leads us to our vision, which is quite succinctly put, to democratize nature. When we're looking at climate change and the world becoming more of a dense place and people moving into big urban centers, we full-heartedly believe that nature is a human right, even though it's not actually recognized as a human right by the UN. But for us, what we're really trying to do is bring nature to people and believe that that will basically make the world a better place and change people's lives. Next. So these are the two branches that I was just referring to. We have one branch called Rewild and one branch called Omni Workshop. So Rewild is really centered in science and nature. That's our horticulturalists, our soil scientists, microbiologists. And then Workshop is a landscape architecture studio, and we're doing work on full sites. But really within the confines of our office, we have this sort of mixing pool of systems thinkers, people kicking ideas around, and we collaborate internally. But we do actually engage on contracts as separate entities, Rewild and Workshop. Next. But to just show these sort of like technical guts, this is where the company started 15 years ago, was in the science. And how do you really bring nature into underutilized spaces? That's what we look at, like holistically speaking. And this sort of hit the market first for us on rooftops. And now I'll show you some more projects about how we're integrating this thinking into sites across all different kinds of fronts. But basically, the Rewild side invented a soil, which is creating more life. It's a living ecosystem. And that soil basically hit the market first on rooftops. So looking at integrating ecosystem services into, you know, a built environment, architectural spaces, and things like that. And really what we're doing is we're trying to replicate Mother Nature, or trying to get the hell out of her way. You know, it's like, look at what nature does best and try to emulate that. And when we're building spaces, it's essentially terraforming, bringing life into a space that is completely doesn't have life. We look at building up soils and then introducing plants and ecosystems onto these spaces. Next. So I'll show you a few different projects that are sort of getting into this. So this is our headquarters. Hopefully some of you will come here this afternoon for happy hour. This is in the South Side in Bronzeville. It was a 100-year-old milk bottling plant. And I think it's like 13,000 square feet, something like that, of green on top of this 100-year-old warehouse that we built up through different, basically different demonstration gardens, different trial gardens. On the left of your picture is something that might be, looks more like a backyard. In the foreground on the right is more like a natural seeded prairie, native prairie. And then on the right in the back is more of a planned sort of curated landscape with the trees and things like that. But basically taking underutilized spaces like a rooftop and making it, bringing nature into that space to make a better place for people plus nature. Next. This is another example. This one was on top of Studio Gang's roof. It's small, so I'm showing different scale spaces. This one is somewhere around 3,000 square feet. But we used nature to, as an erosion control method, as we installed this roof in, I think it was late October or maybe even into November. And we didn't want those soils that we were building off to blow off in the middle of the winter. So we used a winter wheat that we germinated in our lab and broadcast out here. And we were able to harvest that the next year as like a cereal grain, you know, crop harvest in the center of, you know, maybe you could argue a food desert over on Division. So a really, really interesting application of a more productive landscape. Next. And then we're taking that thinking that sort of started on rooftops for us, and we're putting it down on grade now. This is an exhibit for the Architectural Biennial 21, so 2 years ago, on our lot just north of our warehouse. So if you're coming to visit, you'll be able to walk through this space. But we did a sidewalk share where we ripped down a barbed wire fence that was at the property line, and we pushed back 21 feet for 21 Architectural Biennial. And we basically made a place for people and a place for wildlife, and introduced 30 trees onto the site in a neighborhood that has a shade equity problem. And we did all this on a contaminated site. So it was a vacant lot. It was literally a parking lot a couple of years ago with cracked up asphalt and gravel. And we built a sponge on top to manage stormwater and grow ecosystems. Next. This is a similar idea to what we were doing at Morton Salt. So this is a really sweet concert venue now, but you wouldn't know it if you're there, but the landscape is managing the 100-year storm. It's doing all of the stormwater management on that site. We were able to save the owner millions of dollars by not digging out subtidal decontaminated soil and putting in a cistern underground. Instead, we did a green strip basically at the river edge there that manages all that stormwater and effectively the sponge on top of a concrete cap. So that's a perfect example of a working landscape, and it's the first time the city of Chicago has honored sustainable or stormwater soils in this regard. Next. And this one is actually this thinking of underutilized spaces. This is a stretch of industrial river on the east side of Goose Island that we're now transforming into a recreational river. So we're looking at this 8-foot seawall along the Chicago River, and we're trying to figure out how to basically reestablish that lost ecosystem where land meets water. It was divorced 100 years, or actually 150 years ago when they cut the channel. And now we're looking for ways of, this is a floating, the Wild Miles, the project, and it's a floating eco garden. So it's a modular floating system, floating wetlands that helps to clean the water, create habitat, create space for people, and basically reintroduce something of a riparian edge. So animals like turtles or even your otter or your snapping turtles or the beavers can really move from water to land. And last slide here. I didn't want to forget about triple bottom line. So basically when we're looking at rewilding and when we're looking at bringing nature into underutilized spaces, that's the three P's, the people, the planet, and the pocketbook, right? So if you're looking at planet and people, that's great, but you've got to make it make financial sense. Otherwise, you would never be seeing built work. But anyhow, this is an example with the district house is a multi-unit residential building in Oak Park, where we were building green roofs as basically as yards on the second floor. And it proved out we were able to get the dollars from our developer friend, who was saying that they were actually selling their second floor units at 10% more than their third floor units. The third floor, if you could see in that picture, just had these smaller terraces. Second floor, they had a whole yard. So it might not be a surprise, but the proof is in the pudding. It actually, you know, if you bring nature to people, it is valued. And that bar graph on the lower right is showing that it might have cost about $20,000 to install one of these, but they recouped it in the sale cost, you know, almost, well, not quite 4 times that, but it was an immediate ROI. So it's really exciting to think about nature and how it can work for us, but also work for the planet.
Thanks, Michael. So how do we take a look at determining how these productive and transformative landscape designs, how do we take a look at how well they're doing, and especially validating that over time? So with the Sustainable Sites Initiative, it's a comprehensive land design and development rating system that is being used by both private and public sectors all around the world. In particular, being used by the GSA pretty heavily in combination with their kind of mandate to have a goal minimum from LEED. So site certification is given to landscapes, site infrastructure, and spaces that demonstrate a high level of environmental and social sustainability. And it works for all types of projects with or without a building. Some examples include parks, university campuses, commercial headquarters, and it can also span from new construction or major renovation of existing sites. Next slide, please. So what can it apply to? Sites was designed to be flexible and adaptable for any project undergoing new construction or in particular major renovation, and all types of projects from mixed use developments to urban and with a rural context. It can be used for almost any project size. For example, the scale of the project certified through the pilot program when it first started under Sites V1 ranged from less than a quarter acre to over 200 acres. So there's a vast difference in terms of the sizes that can be site certified. The budgets for these projects also varied widely from less than $20,000 to over $20 million. Sites has been applied to both undeveloped and developed landscapes, and especially from what Michael was saying, contaminated brownfield landscapes can also achieve certification. Next slide, please. So what are the benefits of site certification and this higher level of sustainable design? In addition to a reduced impact on the land, sites projects also help to save money. Studies show that sustainably designed outdoor spaces can use less energy by utilizing energy efficient equipment and lighting. Strategically placing trees and other vegetation near or on buildings also takes advantage of this alternative energy, such as solar, geothermal, and wind, to name a few. These strategies not only lower utility bills, they also reduce the need for dependence on foreign fuel sources and aid in reducing carbon emissions. There are also several social reasons that people have been using sites. It encourages sustainable business practices, of which sites is focused, similar to what LEED does, creating a sense of community due to sites' attention to community infrastructure and access to public transportation. It's not just the site, it's how that site connects to the immediate surrounding context, and supporting the domestic economy because sites draws heavily on the local service providers and calls for materials to be manufactured within a 500-mile radius. So these are just a few examples of social reasons that people have found using sites is valuable. Next slide. So what's the story here? Another important reason that owners and clients decide to use rating systems like LEED or sites in particular is it's a powerful PR and storytelling tool. There are benefits associated with certification. Both public and private sectors know that sustainability is not merely an add-on to their strategies. It's a fundamental piece of their overall strategy. Sites enables clients to walk the talk and demonstrate to prospective and current employees, visitors, and other site users that they can care about the environment and that they value those who are living, working, and using their outdoor spaces. It has become increasingly evident that a sound sustainability strategy drives innovation and employee engagement, and it attracts people to visit and benefit from a project, whether it's a park or corporate campus. It also demonstrates compliance and leads to market differentiation, all key ingredients for long-term growth and profitability. Next slide. So how do we measure success? Sites is a concise framework, just like LEED for identifying and implementing practical and measurable sustainable land design, construction, and in particular, operation and maintenance strategies and solutions. With sites, there's a focus on validation of the success of the space over time to ensure that the project still performs at a high level as intended post-design and construction. This is highlighted by 14% of the total credits are focused on human health and well-being over the life of the project. 11% are dedicated to the ongoing operations and maintenance of the project, and 5% are devoted to the ongoing education of the public and performance monitoring of the design moving forward. Next slide. Okay, but does it actually work? This garden was a public demonstration in Santa Monica to show the difference between a traditional landscape and a sustainable landscape, and how cost-effective, environmentally beneficial, and easy to replicate it is. Over the course of a 9-year case study documenting these two gardens at the same time, it showed that the native garden used 83% less water, it generated 56% less green waste, and required 68% less maintenance when compared to the traditional garden. The native garden also cost $16,000 to install compared to the $12,000 for the traditional garden. Despite its initial higher cost, the native garden's lower maintenance requirements translate to about $2,200 per year in cost savings. And that is a very brief overview of sites.
Great. Thank you, Zach, Michael, and Jack. All right, so we are going to just jump into discussion, get a little bit deeper in with our panelists here. Everybody who's on the line, please go ahead and put questions into the Q&A, and we'll weave them into the discussion as well. So everything we've heard, very inspiring. Resilient landscapes are amazing. We need them everywhere. If only it was that easy. You know, it's very different. It's a very different way of thinking about landscapes and about its function. And I know every practitioner on this panel has run into barriers to gaining adoption of resilient landscapes. So Michael, maybe let's start with you. What are some of the challenges you faced in getting buy-in for this approach?
Yeah, it's funny. I think a big part of it that I see is it's like what is the definition of beauty? I think that this notion of a biodiverse landscape is not the same as maybe what we were growing up with more of a manicured landscape. And a biodiverse, if I say rewilded a lot, but I think you understand what I mean. That kind of a landscape is just so beautiful. And I think more and more people are starting to see it that way. But it does take some momentum and time. So I think there's this sort of like lack of precedence in the understanding that this is a beautiful landscape. And by the way, it also does all this stuff for you, you know. The other thing I see as a challenge to implementation is just the perceived cost of it. I think because of the sort of the lack of precedence, or because it's a newer, I don't want to use the word trend because I think it's here to stay, but it's a newer movement. I think that sometimes contractors can look at this and say, oh, the maintenance cost is going to be so much more. It's just flat out not true. But I think it's about educating the public and also educating those who are building and maintaining these so that they know how to optimize the development of this kind of landscape.
Great. And there's a related question here in the Q&A about what factors cause higher install costs for native landscapes compared to traditional ones. Maybe you can kind of expound on that a little bit more about, you know, sometimes things are perceived, sometimes are actual, like what's really driving the costs more specifically?
Yeah, I think, well, I think a big one is maintenance, and maybe Jack's probably more qualified than I am on this one, but I think that if it is understood how to maintain a biodiverse landscape, then it actually can save you. It's like what Jack was saying the other day. It's like if you work with Mother Nature, it's going to be a lot better than working against her. And so I think that there's when it comes down to the cost, there's like perceived labor hours probably and perceived maintenance regimen that needs to get right-sized with what the actual is. I don't know if I'm skirting this too much, but Jack, you can probably help me on that.
Well, I would say that, you know, initially the cost of maintaining a sustainable landscape in a natural area is about as much as you would pay for traditional landscape. That the savings come in, you know, the third, fourth, fifth year and beyond. Because if you get the density of native plant communities, whether they're on the roof or prairies, woodlands, wetlands, peatlands, whatever, savannas were in the poll, dense native healthy communities don't have much room for weeds, and therefore you don't have the work to take care of it. And that's the problem with selling them, is they're not done properly. They look weedy. They're not maintained. They look weedy. And then somebody says, oh, you want to do like that project over there? And they point to a weed patch and say this was supposed to be a rain garden or a bioswale. So it's the failures that hurt us as much as the successes help us, because people look at it and go, yeah, I tried it. Doesn't work. I'm like, hey, it was a failure. Let's show you how it's to succeed.
I think too, just to continue on the topic of cost, you know, cost relative to what? You know, you're comparing it to a traditional landscape, but the native landscapes are providing a lot more services, and what are the value of those services? So, you know, rethinking the value of these landscapes as something more than just ornamental or recreational, but a fundamental piece of infrastructure, in the same way we see our energy grids or our sewer systems as infrastructure. You know, these are providing stormwater management and all sorts of other benefits. and that's worth investing in. So I guess maybe Jack, what are you seeing in terms of how people are really viewing the value of green infrastructure and their willingness to pay for it?
Well, I would say that it's you connect with them through something that they value. If it's money, easy, can lay out a case for that. We have cost studies for turf to prairie or new landscape, native to non-native. But you find, if it's the wildlife, it's the flowers, if it's beauty, if it's context, if it's carbon sequestration, whatever it is. If that's the language in which they understand that, I'm going to pull them in, all based on beauty, if that's their thing. Because ecosystems are beautiful. Nature's beautiful. Ecosystems suck carbon out of the air. Wetlands and prairies do more than woodlands and savannas do. And so we show them numbers like that. If it's helping hold a shoreline in place, like with a civil engineer, and the toe of the slope needs to be rock, well, then it needs to be rock. Native plants will not take and hold on to rapidly moving shorelines. So we work with whatever they value. And that's how we get the connection. And then once they connect with it, then it's off to the races.
This this question is making me think of basically we encounter this a lot on projects. As landscape architects, we want to get into the projects early as we can. And I think the same as a civil engineer, the earlier we are working, this is the beauty with working landscapes. It's no longer the frosting on the cake. They become future-proofed. They get engineered into the project if you're there early enough and are able to prove out their value amongst the other engineered solutions. So I'm thinking specifically in regards to like the Morton Salt project, where we're using it as a stormwater management device. And so basically these are working systems. They're not tack-on add-ons. And so when you're doing cost estimating at the very beginning, your first cost estimate, an SD or whatever, we need to be comparing the cost. What we typically do is we'll chase what's the cost of a traditional cistern, pipe it out kind of solution versus a green infrastructure solution where you're managing it with the soils and the landscape. And then because once we can decipher an apples to apples comparison, the living or the green infrastructure solution is going to save you money, then you're going. But it's really tricky to get cost estimates to be line items that are sort of decipherable or like that allow you for apples to apples comparisons that early in the game. But that's getting deep.
I'll add to that. And I think, Zach, you work in a multidisciplinary team, so you probably have a little earlier. But it's then taking, if you're at the tail end or, in the case of, sometimes we bid other people's project. We did an Army Corps project in Orland. So Orland grassland, 1,000 acres, had to remove 12.5 miles of drain tiles so that we could rehydrate the site. And after the first big rainstorm, the village engineer for Orland came over and said, "You caused flooding on this property." And I'm like, wait, gravity doesn't work different here because your yard is actually higher than the site. So that couldn't be us because water doesn't flow uphill. And he said, "Well, you removed all that. Now I've got all that water coming in." And I said, quite the opposite. All that water was leaving the site in those drain tiles, dumped into your sewer system, which then had to be dealt with. Now all that water goes in to the ground here. So there is virtually none coming off the site in the growing season. And I said, "You have a big sponge." And boy, did I see that light bulb go on with the civil engineer. And he's like, "Wow, you're right." I said, "Yeah, less water through there, less wear and tear on the gray infrastructure. Therefore, you longer life for those pipes." So at some point we'll find a way to educate those people, but the goal is be there right at the beginning in a collaborative design.
Great. So if you're going to take away one thing from this, it's bring in your landscape architect and your civil engineer early in the process to really be able to integrate these things, because they are the first to get value engineered out when you bring them in late. So when you get them kind of embedded at the front end, that's where you can find real innovations, real cost savings, and just get really, really cool projects. We mentioned maintenance, and I want to talk about that because that is another feature that's really different, I think, in how we maintain these projects over time. It's not mowing turf grass, and if they're not well maintained, they become weedy, they're a nuisance, they don't perform. So I'll throw Zach this question. I guess, what lessons have you learned in your work about how to best prepare clients for the maintenance obligation?
So we've done a few different ways. At least with the sites projects, there's a full operations and maintenance manual that's one of the credits. And the thing that we found that was the most helpful is that, to Jack's point, we're showing what the landscape looks like in that interim kind of ugly duckling phase, where it looks more weedy than I think a lot of people expect, especially working in some projects that are in a more suburban area. They're expecting more of a lawn and a few trees here and there, essentially your Canadian geese tractors. So it's about educating them and showing them real life examples about over time on a timeline what to expect to see, and kind of just reinforce the fact that hey, this is nature. It needs to mature over time, and ultimately you will have less maintenance. Sure, there'll be some more maintenance in the interim, but you just kind of have to see it through. That's the biggest thing, because we've had one client that we have worked with a lot, where even people from the city or people working within the building are complaining about, hey, this is like not looking good for particularly stormwater detention areas, where they're like, hey, this doesn't look like what I'm used to. And well, sure, it doesn't, because it doesn't have a giant fountain or something and a gateway next to it, and trees just surrounding it. But this is how it needs to look to operate at the highest level that it needs to. And then to the Jack's other point, we just like to broach the subject as soon as possible and bring the client on board in terms of saying, really, here are the benefits of doing a landscape like this, a more native one that does sure require a lot more interim maintenance, but it's going to save you a lot of money in the long run compared to engineered solutions that are below ground that can sometimes fail. So it's an education process from the very beginning.
I'll get back to Jack's first slide. Education is key. So we just have a few minutes left. I want to ask one last question. I know there's still questions in the chat. Looks like our panelists are getting to them directly. If there's any questions that don't get answered, we'll have an opportunity to share answers to them in the follow-up. But I wanted to bring back the equity lens into this conversation. The issue of maintenance is a great place to do it, because we at Greenprint have found that while resilient landscapes are needed more than ever in frontline communities, they often don't have the resources to support that long-term maintenance. We do a lot of green schoolyards work where the facilities team struggles to maintain the schoolyards they already have, and now we're asking them to add some rain gardens on top of that. So I'll open this up to kind of whoever wants to answer, but what are some approaches that we could be taking to make the design and implementation of resilient landscapes more accessible to property owners who don't have the same resources as, say a Northwestern University?
So I will say, in what we've done, that you don't make them complex. If budget is a limiting factor, make them look like traditional landscapes. Perennial beds, and they're not worried about biodiversity or managing some full form and function. It's just, hey, just keep the weeds out and get this dense, make it simple grass beds or something, and have that manual, the operations and maintenance manual, because I heard a good saying, the earth didn't come with an owner's manual, so we have to write them to give to people. Make them simple, because it does take labor. Also, educate the staff. So as volunteers come and go, or the staff come and goes, there's something to follow, because we get called back to a lot of sites and they're like, we know you did something here, but what did you do? And then you lay it out and they're like, they gave me nothing when I walked in to this position. So that would be it, is write it down and educate it, make it a little more simple.
Great. Any final words, Michael or Zach, before we head to our final poll?
We do that. Essentially technical advising. We work with landscape contractors around the country, but like even the ones down the street, and help them, even if we're not the ones actually doing the maintenance. We have the technical chops in-house who can help troubleshoot and take them through a sort of the typical regimen. I would also say that I think that here in Bronzeville, we've been here for 3 years and we're learning about all sorts of assets here, and people who are just really, really excited to learn how to work with. You know, we call these innovative landscapes. They're really they're the OGs, you know, like they're the original landscapes. So I think that it's a sort of a recognition for the assets that we have, and then yeah, it's like Jack said, it's a lot of it's about education or learning how to work with it. So.
Great. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, everybody on this panel. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. I'll turn it back to IGA for our final polling question.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to put one more poll in. I'm launching it now, and we're just asking, did your view of landscapes change from today's event? Let us know. And while that's going, I'll just remind you all that we're going to send out a follow-up email with a recording of this, and hopefully get some of the unanswered questions answered by our speakers. And then if you signed up to join us this afternoon at Omni Ecosystems, we're all gathering there at 5:30 to tour the rooftop and have a little bit of a happy hour. That starts at 5:30 and ends at 7:30. And there's street parking, and we're excited to see you. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and close this poll and show you the results. We've got 73% saying yes, their views changed, and 27% saying no. That seems pretty good. So thank you all again. Thank you, speakers, for joining us. And all of our speakers will be at the Omni rooftop this evening. If you want to chat with them, we'll all be hanging out. Thank you all. Have a great day. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.